Reporting. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So we are.
Somebody offer a prayer.
Sure. Any volunteers?
I need all the help I can get. I'm still not sure which way I want to tell this guy to go. I'm not sure if it's doomed from the beginning or not.
I can say it if you guys want.
Sure, that'd be great. Thanks, Dylan.
Yeah, no problem. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this wonderful day which thou hast blessed us with. We're so very grateful for this opportunity we have to come together as a team and to discuss this case. And Father, we ask you please bless us with thy spirit that we may know what to say and what to do with it. And we're grateful for this opportunity we have to learn more. And we're so very grateful for everything thou hast done for us. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we'll just start doing this outline here. It says to try to talk about we have to reconstruct the key elements of the business model. So we can just go through the 4 steps here and just talk about what we think that they should have done. The first one is the customer value proposition, which is why a customer should buy a product or use. So what did Cake Financial do for their customer value proposition? What I think that they did is I think that the reason their whole purpose of this was to create a social experience within the trading markets. And so the way that they presented it was that they should allow that a individual trader would be able to see what people around them were doing that had similar interests, and they were the only one in the market that was planning on building a model that would take your friends and your family and people that were doing really well in the stock market and kind of pair you up with them so you could see what they were doing versus what they were doing and improve your portfolio. That's kind of what I thought their value proposition was.
That was going to happen, but that's not what happened.
That's not what happened, but that was their proposition. That was what they wanted to do.
Correct.
Right. So, does anybody else have anything to add to that?
I don't.
Yeah, I mean, he thought that would happen for certain, but wrong gender for that one to happen, I think.
Right. So then their go-to-market plan, which is an action plan that specifies how a company will reach customer and achieve competitive advantage. What was their go-to-market plan at the beginning?
Well, at the beginning, they were planning on, slow build up, have the alpha site and then the beta and all that good stuff. And that before they released the 1.0.
Right.
But that didn't happen either.
Yeah, their marketing plan was way weird. I don't know, I didn't mention too much about a marketing plan, but yeah, it's like they didn't even try almost with it, I thought, because...
Well, it was going to be a slow thing, they were going to have a test market and then a private test market, then a more public one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, then they were going to release the 1.0.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then TechCrunch came up, and guess what? Everything went out the window with that thing.
Right, and that goes into their technology and operations strategy. I don't think they had one.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I think
nothing that they showed us at least. But.
Right, I think they had an idea of what they wanted to do on the technology side, at least, because he knew he had to build this super complex model, but he was terrible at executing it. He just didn't. I don't know. I think he had a really good idea on paper and just couldn't figure out how to execute it and scale it properly.
True.
Well, I think it was too elaborate.
Mm-hmm.
That was his biggest problem. Was he knew it was going to be big and heavy duty and all that stuff, and so that's why he wanted to do the slow build up before he went to market. But that didn't work out so well either. I mean, the poor guy just didn't work out at all.
Trisha, if you're trying to talk, we can't hear you. Yeah, pretty much.
I think that he aimed for too broad of an audience. I mean, Yeah, because it was like it wasn't specific enough, so it wasn't really doing what anybody wanted it to do. And once they actually pared it down to focus on like one customer profile, that's when it actually like started making some money. But in the beginning, it was just too broad.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that specifically. Yeah.
Well, and they talked about that too, is how because they didn't really focus on the customer end of it. They focused more on the back end. And so they really missed an opportunity to capture their market and figure out who really was the people that were investing the most. So
Yeah.
Right. When their differentiator was going to be this is a social atmosphere.
Mhm.
And then it almost felt like the front end of it was just kind of thrown together last minute. And that's going to be one of the more important things. You know, the people that want to check to see what their peers are doing, those are just the every day, you know, I have an extra $20, let's throw it at the stock market and see what happens. It's not the heavy duty investors that you need to have all of the back end information for. So I think that they should have flipped it around and spent more time working on the front end to bring more people in, make it a social experience so that they want to invest.
Mm-hmm. Right. I totally agree with that. Yep.
Yeah, I had front end down too. Focus on front end instead of the back end as much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the cash flow formula, did you guys see anything about that in here? I couldn't really find, I mean, I know there's stuff in there, but I wasn't really sure what that was asking.
What's the really? There's
Right,
right.
The cash flow was the cash flowed out of the business
Yeah, that's
Right.
really fast.
300 grand a month.
Yeah, 300,000 a month.
What were they spending that on? I mean, they had
I was wondering too. I was like, they really just blew through it.
right. I mean,
Technology is expensive, and I'm sure they had to pay these investment companies that they were linking up to quite a bit. But yeah, that's a lot to go through
Well,
for
Well, and they
small
also-
staff.
They also had like 20 employees.
right. I was just thinking about, and like, how many of them were engineers? Like quite a few of them. So I imagine,
boatload, yeah.
I would imagine that they would have, that he was having to pay these. I mean, he just didn't do very good operationally, for sure.
And, you know, rent's going to be expensive and all that other stuff. And
Mhm.
Right, their downtown San Francisco office, I'm sure, was a little bit more than we would pay.
Right. Right.
Probably more expensive than anything in Drake's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, okay, so now that we've kind of recreated the business model without even thinking about knowing that they're doomed, just knowing their business model, do we think that they were doomed from the beginning, or was this a promising business model?
I think that it had potential. I just think that they needed to have their vision more clearly set.
I agree.
That's very true. Like, it was a pretty good idea, like the business in general, because I'm like, that would be awesome to have like it work out well. But yeah, they just didn't really execute it the way they should have.
Well, they didn't have any goals, more or less.
Or money either. I mean,
They were
come across too.
willy-nilly everywhere.
Mhm.
You know, when you're talking about go-to-market plan, they switched that around. Customer value positioning, they switched that around. Tech and operational strategy, that was up for negotiation. Cash flow, where was the cash flow formula? I didn't see it. All I saw was cash flowing out. So
Right, but they're just talking about the business model. If you just took the business model and put it down on paper and said this is what they were going to do with their customer, this is how they were going to get it to market. This was their technology plan, and this is how they were going to make money. I mean, on paper, they have a great idea.
they have a great idea, but when
Right.
you look at their plan, what was really their plan that they had?
Well, right, and that's the next part of the question is what would they have done differently to produce a better outcome? Because if on paper, I really think on paper that they really did have a great product and a good idea. If you just look at strictly the business plan, once you get into the actual, like, putting it into motion and everything, they really failed on a lot of things, but on paper it looked good. It looked really good.
I don't know. I would kind of disagree with that. I think it was a good idea,
Mhm.
but I think even the business plan itself, it wasn't there.
Okay, what do you think?
It didn't have. Well, I think the
Didn't have
idea
enough specific.
yeah, he does. He definitely needs to do some pivoting. But I think just the idea of trying to bring more people in to do the investing, that's good. And that's where the social aspect of it comes in. But I didn't see enough about how he anticipated the revenue streams to make me feel like that was something that would be successful, or that needed to be fleshed out just a little bit more. And maybe we just didn't have all of the information, but I just didn't feel like if an investor was looking at it and they'd say, okay, how am I going to make money off of other people investing on this or using this model? I don't know that as an investor I would have gone for it.
Well,
Of course, this is totally outside of my wheelhouse too, so that may be tainting my judgment.
well, they like the idea. And the other thing that really hurt was the whole time frame.
Well, so in looking at the timing of this too, the financial markets crashed.
Crashed in
right,
2007, 2008.
right in the thick of this. So you have to
Right.
kind of take that into consideration also. Like maybe if he had launched it today and had this plan today, would he have been successful? But because
A lot better chance of it, yeah.
right,
That's a good point.
you know, so I mean, unfortunate timing was terrible for him. I mean, he couldn't have been launching an investing business in the worst possible time. And
Unless it was 2001.
Yeah.
that was worse. But
that was worse. But I mean, think about the timing just was bad. It was just a bad time period for him. So if we put, I don't know, Ethan and Dallin I don't know. I lived through the 2008. I mean, that was tough business. You know, I mean, my husband was in construction, and that was a bad time. You know.
horrible.
And so you think about it, I don't know. I think if you were to take the timing out and put him in a different time period, maybe he would have been more successful.
I
That is
think
a
he
really
would
good
have.
point.
Definitely would have.
And when you look at it, he came up with the concept in 2005. Things were still good in 2005. Things were looking up.
These were really good in 2005, like really good.
It was right when he launched that everything crashed.
Everything crashed.
Yeah.
But do you think, okay, thinking about that though, with his business plan and his technology and everything, let's just put him in a different time period. Do you think he would have survived, or was his business model and technology not good enough to push him through? Like,
I think that one. Sorry.
no, go ahead. I was mid thought and stuff.
Okay, I was gonna say I think that one thing that he really missed out on was they kept on talking about creating a lightweight form of the program, and then having a lot of people test it, and he never really got that feedback from anybody. Like the most feedback that he got was just individual opinions from venture capitalists and like real world data on like a lighter weight program. Then I think that he probably could have come to the conclusion that he needed to work on the front end more, and that he needed to market it to a specific type of audience a lot earlier than he did, and then perhaps he would have started generating revenue earlier.
Right. I think one of his biggest mistakes was entering that contest, because then he could not release a beta version.
I agree.
And that was just his test right there. With that beta version, he would have had time to fix some of the issues that they had.
Do you think the beta would have shown people what he was lacking on the front end? Like, would people have been like, I don't like this, and this is...
I imagine so.
Yeah.
I'm sure that would be.
At least point him in that direction.
Yeah, he would get feedback on something, I'm sure, from that, for sure, that he could change on. Because, truth be told, he had quite a few things he could have changed, I think, to make it more successful, or at least get a better startup revenue from it, at least.
Yeah.
That's what he's doing. He was changing things when he got feedback. You know, he went from when you started at 1.0 and then went to 2.0 and then to 3.0 or Cake 2.0 and then it was what, version 3.0? No, Cake 3.0. It was totally a whole different thing from the version 1.0.
Mhm.
I thought it was totally, everything was kind of reversed. And if he would have been able to do the beta and the alpha and all that stuff that he wanted to do, because I want to say the alpha was the private one, going to be released slowly, and then the beta was going to be more public, and then he was going to come out with version 1.0.
Mhm.
Went with TechCrunch, and they said you can't release anything; it's got to be right here. So,
Yeah, he just missed out on a shot to get some real world input.
because it said he was going to do a private alpha site in March of 2007, then a public beta site in June of 2007, and then version 1.0 in November of 2007. However, he went to TechCrunch startup. When was that? September of 2007 was when the TechCrunch was. So I think, yeah. I think the alpha site, which would have been a private one, that would have given him a lot of good feedback. And then the public one in June. So, 3 months later, March to June, and then November. That was going to be a nice rollout. But, he's one of 40 companies that was picked at TechCrunch 40. All the 700 applicants. So you could feel like you're pretty important, but he didn't give him any time to get it out there to the public and get response.
Right.
Did he get anything from that conference or from that company?
Yeah,
or that thing?
We got a lot of interest right at the beginning, but it soon dwindled off.
Mhm.
Yeah, when he didn't have the front side of it to keep that interest, then it ended up hurting him in the long run.
Right.
Because if they say, hey, this is a great idea, everybody come to this website, and they look at the website and, okay, this really sucks, I don't want to go on here anymore, then
Hard to use, and
you've lost the people that you have, plus they talk to others, oh yeah, I tried that, don't even bother.
Mhm. So, but he did. So the next question is talking about having those early focus groups. Why do you not think that they were successful?
Has anybody ever participated in a marketing focus group?
Mm-mm.
I've done a lot of them, and unless you have a really good facilitator, those things are all over the place. You can't really get very much useful information out of them. But if you have a really good facilitator, then they can kind of keep it on track, but then you also run the risk of them steering it in the direction that they want to. So focus groups are good like in the very beginning to find out what people are looking for, but I agree, he needed to have something that they could actually get on and use. Maybe take it to a couple of high schools and have, hey, let's for social studies, let's get on and use this for an hour. Let's see how you guys do and learn about investing.
Huh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that is nice.
And I tend to be I would be one of those people that wouldn't want to share a lot of my real feelings in a focus group. My investment, how would you do this investment? I would share everything.
Yeah,
Do they even have a product that they let the focus group see?
No, I think they just talked about it, what would you want in something like this? And, I used to actually be signed up with a company that did focus groups for just a whole bunch of different companies. So, I was in focus groups at least 2 or 3 times a month sometimes. And you run the risk of everybody just agreeing because they don't want to voice their opinion and be the different one, or it's going to be all over the place. So feedback from those are to be taken with a grain of salt, in my opinion.
They had the wireframe, that they picked in. And, the wireframes, that skeleton depicting of a website showing the key navigational concepts and page content, that's all they had,
Mm-hmm.
So really, they didn't have their product.
No.
What could they have done differently then?
Had a product.
Product.
Before you have self-approved. If they could actually see.
Yeah, I think
But they could say, this thing's really hard to use. It doesn't look very pretty. I'm not so excited about going here.
Mhm.
They could have had a lot. Hey, my camera works.
Hey, there you are.
So,
Yeah.
there it went. Well, now awesome. It worked for 5 seconds.
Hey, at least we proved you're here, right? Write down that timestamp so you can prove you were here.
No, I'm not kidding. My pretty red shirt.
So can we come up with ways Steven's approach is different from Rent the Runway, Dropbox, and Mint?
How it's different.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, let's take Rent the Runway, because that's like the freshest one in my mind. What did they do differently, like as far as approaching the customers and their business model versus what this guy did?
They went out with an open mind. They said, what do you want to see? What do you think would work? Not, this is what I think would work. How can we make it? How can we kind of fit you into that?
Right. They had an idea of how they wanted it to go, but then they quickly pivoted. Like as soon as somebody said that's not going to work, they moved with that.
Yeah, they were more adaptable.
Yeah, and the people that were in the company that were not willing to adapt, they had to replace. They said, if you can't go with the flow, if you can't change, then this isn't the right job for you.
I think their biggest key asset was that they knew they were not experienced in this field.
Oh, that's a good point.
And so they were willing to change, learn and change. They were willing to do that.
Yeah. Now Carpenter, it seems like he was willing to change, but he was a lot slower.
That's true.
Kind of like churning the Titanic,
I would say
like, we'll kind of eventually come around.
his change came more or less from being forced to change, more or less.
Right.
If the customers weren't coming, it was like, well, what can I do to get the customer base? What can he kept trying to figure out how to get customers.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I also felt like he used, I have a friend that calls it a spaghetti approach. We're just going to grab a whole bunch of stuff and throw it at the wall, and whatever sticks is good. And he kind of seemed to do that. Like, we're just going to throw a whole bunch at the wall and see what sticks. Where with the Runway, they had, before they launched anything, before they started to build anything, they had a very clear picture of what they wanted to do. They changed a few times, but they had a very clear picture.
Now, their website stunk at the beginning, but still, they knew they were going to modify and make it better. They knew kind of what needed to change to make it work.
They also seemed like they ran a leaner company as well.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a good point. Yeah. So Mint, if we talk about Mint, the one that won that competition, what did they do differently? Do you guys remember in the case of the right? Well, they won, but they were a social side to. They used that Yodlee for data.
Yeah.
I think that was a huge mistake on his part for not using it. Somebody had already had the wheel. Why reinvent it? I feel like he was so. I feel like part of his problem is that he was almost arrogant in his approach. Like he thought that his way was the only way. And
well, he was going on his last judgment from when he was working for the my whatever, what was it, MyCom or another company, and felt like Yodlee was treated them wrong, did them dirty, hard to work with.
Well, and I think that it's it's good that he knew that they would be hard to work with, but also if he was trying to do it in a condensed time frame, maybe he should have gone with them for the first year while he got his infrastructure built on the back, and then he could take over. Yeah, just kind of go with the minimum viable concept.
But see, that's what Mint had an advantage over, was they let them do the back end, and they worked hard on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
And so the front end was much more appealing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they already developed.
Yeah, it says Mint
was developed.
Mint wasn't easy to service to sell to consumers. It was free and a better version of Quicken, something that people already understood.
And they were both in the social, like their whole thing was the social market, and most of their users were women, where his users were all men, mostly all men.
Yep, the majority of their users were women, and they're more social than the men would be.
He just didn't do customer, like, market research. He just didn't know. He kept saying over and over again, he was more focused on the back end and not worrying about the front end.
Right.
And the customer aspect of it, which, I
And
mean,
then you wondered why we didn't have any customers.
right.
How
And
do you know that works?
yeah.
And realistically, if you're going to market as social media or anything social, your primary target is going to be women. We're just naturally more social.
Mhm.
Men are like, I'm going to do my investing. I'm going to do my own thing. You don't need to see what I'm doing. I don't want to see what you're doing. I don't care, because I know what I'm doing.
Right.
And women are like, ooh, what do you have? You know?
So do you think his business model was wrong then? Because he wanted it to be a social game, a social aspect. But if his customers aren't engaging in social activity, how could he have marketed better or differently?
Yeah, I don't think that social was the way to go, honestly. One thing I've learned from everything basically every business book I've ever read is you're likely to be, if you take the 5 people that you're closest to, that's who you're most likely going to be with. So if I wanted investment advice, I'm not going to ask my sister. I'm not going to ask my mom. I'm not going to ask my best friend, because they're all pretty much economically the same place I am. I'm going to ask the guy who owns 6 Dairy Queens, the business owners that are successful. What do you do? So,
Yeah.
so for me, I would probably never do a social.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you think his idea was doomed from the beginning then?
I did.
Because of that?
That was a big part of it. I don't think that he had the infrastructure in place. I don't think he had the business plan. I don't think that it was a unique idea. And one thing that he did do is he did do enough research to know that it would be something that had really high barriers to entry. So he wasn't going to have, as he said, someone that had been coding for a weekend was going to come in and take all his business. So that was one thing that he did do his due diligence. He wanted to make sure that it was something that had that high barrier for entries.
It's too bad he just didn't license and sell what he had.
They finally figured out Artie, it took them forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
no
once they
kidding.
got that figured out, then it was kind of too late.
Figure out what?
Figure out the persona called Artie.
Oh, yeah.
7-year-old married man with 2 kids.
Yeah.
That guy was brilliant. It was too bad that he didn't get him on earlier.
Yeah.
And Artie is not your average person on Facebook. I'm sorry.
Right. No.
So, there was a lot of factors where I thought it was doomed. The social part, I agree with Trish. That was not going to fly. And then working on the back end so much instead of the front end,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't, it seemed like he's just throwing money away, wasn't really worried about customers, kind of worried, but, it was more of, why isn't any more people using this site?
Right. And it says in here, by the end of September 2008, he decided that he was going to license it. but then the market crashed, and so none of the financial firms had money to invest with him. So his timing, I feel like his timing was just so bad on the licensing side that maybe if he had approached that at the beginning, knowing that his front end user platform wasn't good enough, that maybe his company would have survived a little bit.
Well, he could have sold it and made money if he would have went that way right from the get-go.
Right.
He could have sold it to E-Trade or whoever, you know.
Like
Yeah.
selling the code, you think, instead of the whole platform?
Yes. Sell it and go on to something else.
Yeah.
I mean, if he would have got in it like a year earlier and seen that the social part wasn't going to work with what he had envisioned, you know, yeah, timing was the other huge factor, I thought. It was just, you know, the time when it happened, 2007, 2008, you know.
Yeah.
So
It's a-
because was it, so the next question is, was the failure beyond Steven's control?
I'm kind of thinking it was because of the years when he finally launched.
I'm on the fence about that because there are so many things he could have done so much better. But look how many established investing firms lost their shirts at that time.
Yep.
Almost all of them.
You know,
Yeah,
there's
it's true.
I don't know. I think if he had had the opportunity to correct things, I think he might have been successful if it hadn't been for the timing. Because I think he was willing to adjust and adapt. He just didn't, at that point, nobody had the means to provide him the opportunity and the money to do that, to make it better.
And
But
he
I
did
mean-
adjust and adapt with his different versions.
Right. So I think
Yeah.
if he had access to more money, I think he could have redesigned the whole thing. I mean, we're talking, he only did this like in a year and a half, 2 years. That's a really short time period for somebody to grow and develop a business that he had just come up with, you know. So I think that he, unfortunately, the timing was just bad for him. But I think he might have been successful had he had the opportunity and the means to redo it, because he had the back end of it. That's the hard part. He had a really good back end. It was just redoing, and he could have rebranded at that point. He could have changed the name. He could have sold it. He could have done all these different things, but the timing was just not good.
That was out of his control, you know, and that's why I say, yeah. I mean, the 2007, 2008, not a good year to be trying to
To be an
develop.
investment.
right.
Yeah, I think if he did it again now, and maybe with a little more help from other professionals and things like that, with like a little more money, I think it was a good idea. Like, just like you said, Jordan, like he had all the back end stuff with it. All he needed was, I guess, just a little more help with it, and not such like a crappy like state at the time, you know. But,
Right.
Yeah, I
Well,
agree with
he was
that.
influenced a lot of with Facebook's success on the social part.
Right.
Well, and that was the beginning of this of social media. That was, I mean, that was back when MySpace was big.
Right.
So, you know, and so there wasn't. It wasn't as social as it is now. Everybody's like, "Oh yeah, you're not on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and you know everything else." Back then, it was like, "Oh wow, this social thing is new."
Right.
And you
You
know,
got Snapchat.
no, not allowed in my house.
And so, you know, he's thinking that, you know, hey, this is a big thing. And I think if that would have been more developed, he might not have got jumped into that wheel so much. You know,
Could he have used his technology not in the social game, or do you think his his back end was so geared to the social game that it would have failed if he would have gone a different route than the social side of it? Or do you think he still could have gotten across what he wanted to and not market it as a social thing, but yet it still had the social elements built in?
Marketing as a social
I like
thing.
that one. Yeah, I like that.
And I think he's seen Facebook's success, and they were just blowing it up, and he's like, "Oh, got to get on this social stuff." And so that kind of had him all switched out. But if you would have had the chance to not get in that loop, he would have been much better off.
Yeah, I think so too.
So, and so that kind of got him in trouble. And if you did it now, maybe you'd say, hey, social's not the way to go.
Hmm.
Well, not as much, because he had it in his mind that we're going to be able to network and people are going to do this. We're going to get every 5 people, I'm going to get like 2/10 of a person to join because of those 5 people networking together. I'll get one more person, and
Yeah.
that never materialized. That went out the window.
No.
True. Okay. Do we have any more questions, Jordan? Oh, you're
Yeah, I think
muted.
that was it.
Okay, sorry. What low-cost experiment could Stephen have done to test the assumptions behind the main reason for failure?
Well, like we talked about earlier, you could have made a lightweight product. That would have been probably the simplest and most effective way, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And a lightweight product would have done better, I think, socially. I really do.
Yeah, because it would have been easier to use. It wouldn't have been like as committing and as confusing.
Do you think he just had an overcomplicated platform?
Way too overcomplicated if you wanted to be social.
What do you
Yeah,
think he
nobody
could have
wants
done
to do
differently then? Like as far as making it less complicated?
Well, like Mint did, they made it kind of like QuickBooks that a lot of people have been using for years to do their taxes. And
But he had a brand new idea, a brand new product. Nobody out there had it. So he was starting from scratch.
well, he started from scratch and made a humongous monster, thing. If he would have went more lightweight, had 2 versions, kind of like Dropbox, where I said they shouldn't have 2 versions. This one he probably should have.
Like one for less, like kind of segmented it for your average Joe who does a little bit of trading to like your more serious investor who checks every day, several times a day.
That's a good idea.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So,
I like that. Okay.
True.
That is all of the questions. Is there anything else you guys want to kind of hammer out or have?
Well, we also had the other questions that we had right there with the case where you downloaded it, where it said, what was the opportunity for carpenters to identify late in 2005 promising? Was it a promising idea?
I think it was. I mean, we kind of talked about that at the beginning. I think it was.
I thought it was a promising idea, but then he attached social to it. And went heavy that way, where he should have, like I said, if he would have done a lightweight for the social part, that's easier to use, less complicated, he would have had a lot more success.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think, me personally, one of my big hangups about investing, other than I don't like other people controlling my money, but it's almost scary and complicated for people. So for that common investor that just, dabbles a little bit, if you make it simple, they're more likely to use it. But if you look at it and it has this interface that's so difficult to use, then I know I would never go back to it.
Investing is already kind of confusing anyway.
Exactly. So make it simple.
Yeah.
Yes, it again, right? Keep it simple.
Exactly.
So, and if you have a portfolio, I normally have somebody that I go to and talk to, investment firm, if I have a portfolio. I'm not that serious that I'm going to go out and do it all my own self. And see, that's the people you're just kind of looking for. And social media and that deep, big, heavy portfolios, when you're talking about your portfolio with others, I don't think I'd be telling a lot of people.
No.
Tell Brother Betcher, that's who I like to talk to about my portfolio. Don't talk to other people.
Right. It's kind of like telling everybody how much you get paid. It's just not like it's this big, deep, dark secret, but it's also not kind of a leading topic of conversation.
And something you like to share, kind of like, what's your age? You don't like to share your age with most people normally.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, if there's a reason, sure, but
Well, why would I want to share my investment portfolio with other people?
But
Right.
because from what I understood was that his whole thing was to link you up with other successful investors so you could kind of mirror and mimic what they were doing so you could become successful. Would you still
Why
be?
would they want to share that information with you?
I don't know. That was wasn't that the whole premise behind his idea?
Yeah.
Premise,
I
but
think it
you
would
know,
be definitely good if somebody gave you like some help with learning how to invest, because like a lot of people are new at it, and so they would want to know what the strategy is with it. Even. So
Yeah.
Right.
I think it'd be good if somebody kind of shared something on it. Maybe not their
but
like
what
all
if
their financial situation and whatnot, but it would be good to, I think,
you lose money on it?
Yeah.
I
Hot
think
tip of the
that,
week or something,
I
And
think
then
that
you don't like them anymore because
I
it
think
costs
that-
a lot of money.
Go ahead, Ethan.
I think that it could have been really useful for a younger audience, because a lot of younger people don't know how to invest. They don't know, they don't even know the terminology or anything to do with it. However, they do know how to use social networks. And if we're to be put into that kind of a format, and if it were to like if they could have examples of what people are doing in the investing world, then it could kind of get them on the path to learning how to invest. And I think that for a younger audience, that would kind of prove to be a fairly popular avenue to take to learn about investments.
I agree with that. That's a good.
I agree, and that's
Mhm.
right back to Ethan's point about the lightweight version.
Yeah.
Because young people aren't going to get heavy duty deep in portfolio. They're trying to worry about having an apartment and a car to drive and paying their student loans and
hmm
who they're dating, or their first child or their second child, and food on the table. So you could dabble a little bit with investing, which would put you back at a lightweight. My camera went off again. Hey, it's back. Oh, it was on for a second. Hey, I was on for a couple of seconds here.
It was.
I'm so impressed.
All right. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about or anything?
I don't think so. I think we've covered it all pretty much. So I'm good.
Okay, one more question before we go.
Awesome.
Because this one's another one that I thought was interesting. Assets. Assess Carpenter's decision to sell Cake's assets. Could he be done it sooner?
I don't think so.
I know hindsight's
I don't think so.
2020, so it's hard to say yes, he should have done it sooner before he lost as much money. But so it just
And he didn't, honestly, I don't think he knew that the markets were going to be as bad as nobody knew that the market was going to be as bad as it was until it like completely crashed. I mean, that happened so quickly that, I mean, like you said, hindsight's 2020, maybe he should have, but he had a good idea, and had the markets been more stable, he could have gotten the additional funding to fix everything and move forward. So,
And then the follow-up question, should he be given the subscription product more time to develop? Which would mean later. Because he said he could have got funding for a few more months. But he wasn't sure if
I don't think so.
Wasn't sure if he'd get the customers. But he wasn't really looking for customers at this point. He was trying to sell, the subscriptions to the E-Trade and those other guys.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So I was just kind of curious where you guys were thinking, because I'm still not sure where I'm thinking on the products. Those two questions. I mean, hindsight's so easy 2020, and it's like, what do
I
you
don't
look
think it's. Yeah, I don't think it's so much giving the subscription more time to develop. I'd say it was just getting more help from the beginning to make better decisions.
Yeah.
so?
Yeah, I mean, think of if he had that guy Tony on at the very beginning, like to develop Artie, he probably would have been. It's hard to say because he could have had a great product and the market's tanked anyways. So,
But I think he still would have had his idea and focused.
Yeah, he would have had a better shot.
yeah.
So,
Cool.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks for that feedback, because I'm still not sure where I sit on those questions still.
Yeah.
Well,
Because I
we still
read
have
those, and then you read the case, and then you look at it and say, well, I don't know.
Yeah, there is no right answer.
Yeah, there have been a couple of times I've started writing a case study and I end up with a completely different opinion by the time I'm done.
Me too,
It's like-
actually.
Oh, wait, okay. I think I
there's
just talked
this
myself
one.
out of this.
This one, there's so many different choices, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, variables and things like that. It's like the time frame of when it happened, you know, would have it been different? We discussed that quite a bit. It's just,
Yeah.
oh, I'm
You
not
never
looking
know.
forward to writing this thing up.
No. I'll be glad when it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, this was an interesting one. So
This is the hardest one we've had by far, I think.
yeah.
this one was hard.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Everybody good for Thursday then? Same time, same place?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. We'll see you on Thursday then.
Yeah.
All right, you guys take it
No
easy.
more decisive.
Yeah, you too. Okay. Good night.
Yeah, we'll see you.
Good night.
Bye.